Oh, hello. I'm going to present a part five to my NDE series. This time I'm approaching it completely differently. I'm not going to go into any further detail on the NDE experiences that I've become familiarized with. But at this point, I actually want to reflect on some of my own personal takeaways, how this has affected my own philosophy and thinking. Uh, so I'm going to be probably all over the place a little bit with this one because I've been doing a lot of thinking. I mean, this has been what I would almost term, if we use NDE for near death experience, OBE for out of body experience. There's STE for spiritually transformative experience. Um, I'm going to use the term life transforming awakening, LTA, for my own experience, just because I feel like this has pretty much completely revamped my thinking. And I think one thing it's important as we get older is to stay open minded enough to consider new information. And when we do receive new information, we can change our views on things. And I think that's a healthy thing to do in general, to be able to do. This all near death experience study has brought in so much new information that I think is valid, that it's replaced a lot of my old programming. And one reason I'm open to that whole thing is I've seen a lot of flaws in the past things that I've been in, and I'm not shooting down religion in general, but I will say I grew up on a church pew in a Methodist church and benefited in a lot of ways from that. It was a good group of people following what they believed to be a good system of belief and cooperation and it was good. You have community, you have fellowship, you have friends, and all of these things that I think are healthy and good. And when I grew up, I mean, I'm 65 now, so this is looking back into the 60s and 70s when I was in the formative years. And there were good and bad things going on. And since then, I've cycled in and out of a number of churches, having moved different places. Basically Christian churches. The last church, or the second to last one that I was in, was very fundamentalist and devolved into a cult-like group. And it's at a point, my wife and I realized there were some things wrong, and did very negative emphasis, and had become very controlling and restrictive and kind of dark and judgmental. And there was just so much negativity going on that we decided we needed to leave. So we did, and that was painful and difficult. And Matt, this was quite a few years ago. And since then, it took a while to recover because we kind of lost benefit of the group we were with. We were kind of isolated away from family and from the world. We had this kind of, how would you say it, a very isolated mentality where the teaching was that basically our church was the only one that really had the truth, and that the outside world was hostile and unfriendly, and people were deceived and the other churches were deceived, and all this kind of isolationist thinking. When we got out, we found the world was much friendlier and accepting than the church we were in, really less judgmental. So we left that. We did get involved with one other kind of mainstream big box type church. It wasn't bad, but at one point we realized we were hearing the same thing over and over, and pretty much knew as much as we needed to of the teachings that we were getting. And our kids had reached an age where they were kind of maxed out on that scene. So since then, we began to want to think on our own. We had to recover from the situation we were in, where we basically stepped away and lost our support system, basically, and had to reconnect with our family and reconnect with the real world. And it took a bit of doing. So as of late, we've become involved in the SPTV community, which is kind of an anti-Scientology, anti-cult online group. And that's been a big education in its own way, because these are all people, most of which had come out of either Scientology, which is a terrible cult, or other cults. And we've been studying and trying to help other people process what they've gone through, having been involved in these cults. So it's been a very interesting trip. So over the last few years, I kind of took on this mindset of wanting to understand, where do we go from here? Okay, we got out of cults, we got away from wrong thinking as much as we could, but I mean, it takes a long time. Like, we've seen examples recently of, it's like the old joke about the trailer park. You can get the girl out of the trailer park, and you may not be able to get the trailer park out of the girl. Well, for cults and Scientology, you get somebody out of a cult like Scientology, and they've been programmed and propagandized and indoctrinated with false doctrine. So you get them physically out of a cult, and now their brains are programmed with all this memorized mumbo jumbo and very wrong thinking. And now, and all cults operate in defective ways that really screw people up. They get brainwashed and indoctrinated with false information and beliefs. And it's very hard to disconnect from that completely and reprogram yourself, because these bad ideas still have a hold. And I aspire to be completely free, and I'm working my way through what I would consider becoming free of the influence of the cult that we were in. And I'll go as far as to say, I think there's a lot of validity in Christianity and other religions, and yet most of them take on this sort of exclusive, we're the only ones that have it right mentality. And in the end, what's been revealed to me through this NDE study is that nobody's got it totally right, and that as much as there's truth in a lot of things, that whole exclusive, there's only one way to go mentality creates a lot of misdirected zeal and a lot of negativity, where people are judging other churches, judging other people, and it's really creating this big mess. I hear a phone ringing in the background. It's distracting me. I hope it stops so shortly. So the NDE study, this has been very interesting. I took this up probably a couple of years ago and kind of got into it by way of watching. I mean, I'd read some of the old books, Ray Moody and Edgar Casey and various people that had been studying experiences like this, and they've been being studied, recorded, and experienced for thousands of years. There's even places in the Bible where these things have been mentioned and alluded to, and in other religions, like the Eastern religions, there's been a lot of research into these types of things. The Western church, especially fundamentalist Christianity, has really kind of rejected a lot of this, because they reject a lot of what we would consider New Age. I mean, the cult we were in, really shot down the New Age, anything to do with it, even though a lot of it was very valid, as I'm finding out. But so the NDE study, the near-death experience studies, listening to hundreds of YouTube videos, and I try to find first-person videos where the people themselves that experienced this are directly speaking about it, and it's normal, everyday people that are just explaining what happened to them in a situation where they might have been killed in an accident and passed away temporarily, heart attack, car crash, a number of things, where they left their bodies and were able to travel elsewhere and experience a taste of life on the other side. And absolutely fascinating. So I find that the volume of evidence and the evidence that's been produced in this study has been sufficient to convince me this is real. This is more real than anything that I was ever told, any secondhand teaching or explanation, any book that was read or produced. And people have tried to use all kinds of religious texts, and over time a lot of these things have been distorted by people that didn't know better. They're trying to figure out what religion really is, what's true, and in some cases, I think people just don't really like a lot of pastors and preachers now. I realize after listening to so many NDE stories that these people that have come back from going to the other side and meeting angels and meeting Jesus and meeting past relatives, these people come back with the sharpest recall of these events, and they're more real than their actual life. And their testimonies are so plausible, and hundreds of people reporting very similar, not the same exactly, because everyone experiences these things differently, but they come back with a very consistent story, and it overrides, in my opinion, anything I've ever been taught or told. And unfortunately, over time, a lot of we have limited understanding of history, especially me. I'm not a huge history student, but people over thousands of years, there's been kings and conquerors and rulers and people that had a motive to try to control populations, and they distorted and rewrote and filtered religious texts and teachings to the point where a lot of churches have basically things that are inconsistent with what NDE people have said. And I'm more convinced by the people that have had NDEs and come back than I am people insisting that their fundamentalist interpretations of the Bible or other texts are more correct. And these people seem to be so rigid and so negative in many cases that I find it infinitely more plausible that the God or the source or the creator that's described by people that have come back, this God is more accepting, less judging, and overlooks all the differences as far as religious background and church attendance and all of that. And I sort of make a joke out of the idea, like, all these people seem to think their religion might be the right one, but what if you're in the wrong religion? What if you go to the wrong church? What if you're reading the wrong translation of the Bible or some text? I mean, they can't all be right. And so the good thing is the God that is experienced by NDEers in general is an extremely loving, indescribably loving, non-judgmental God that's looking to see all of us reach our highest and best. And the Bible even speaks of Jesus saying, quoting a psalm in which he says, "You are gods." Like, we are created in his image. We are created to become, ultimately, he said, "You'll do what I do and even more." Jesus said this to his followers. And there were people that were sufficiently open or enlightened then to follow him and understand what he was talking about. Most people couldn't and didn't. And until recently, I was one of those people that couldn't grasp a lot of these concepts. They didn't make sense to me. And now that I'm hearing it from people that have been to the other side, I'm like, it all makes sense. It's all starting to fall into place, and all the boxes are being checked one by one. So it's like I was seeing through a glass darkly. Now it's getting a little clearer. It's still have a long way to go, and I realize a lot of mental retraining and reprogramming to get a decent understanding of what I actually believe. But anyway, having said all that, which is much more than I intended to say to preface what I'm saying, I wanted to lay that down. Sort of my background being, a seeker, a person that wants to know what the real truth is. I haven't given up that fight. I feel like I've recovered sufficiently from the cult and distorted religious experience to really be more open to the realities that I previously had rejected. And one reason I rejected that is because a lot of church teaching emphasizes you need to believe this or else. And there's a lot of really negative teaching that sort of it creates a false picture of what I see as God. Like, instead of a loving God, this is a threatening, demanding, angry, wrathful God that if you don't toe the line, you're going to get thrown in hell. And that's scary and negative and puts you in fear. And yet Jesus said, perfect love casts out all fear. And there's a whole chapter that Paul wrote about love in 1 Corinthians. I mean, there's a lot of things Jesus said, like God is love. Well, if God is love, he also said perfect love casts out all fear. So if you're in fear and you're under an angry God, I question what God you're under. It's inconsistent with what people coming back from the other side experience, because from every type of background, even hardcore atheists, people that hated God, blamed him for their circumstances. Now we're looking at this God that's infinitely loving, that overlooks all this stuff, that's very forgiving, that's not looking to throw anyone away, and really wants to see us all reach our full potential. So, having said that, I just want to touch on the idea, like cults, cult involvement, all this type of thing that I've been, exposed to in the SPTV community on YouTube. So the takeaway for me about that is, I realized one of the big emphases in the NDE thing is the idea that God gave us free will. We have free will. The reason this planet is so difficult, it's considered a learning planet. It's very difficult to live here. And I realized part of the reason is it's a learning planet. And there's people that are from every level of being. Like, Jesus was what some refer to as an ascended master. He had learned so much and studied so much that he became very much, the Bible describes him as God. I'm not sufficiently educated about this to be able to give a very good opinion, but I feel like people have gone over to the other side and met Jesus, and some would say he's an ascended master that has reached such a level that he's capable of manifesting the miracles and the things that he did on earth way beyond where we are. And most of us, there's people here that are not too evolved, that are very ignorant. There's people that don't realize that the golden rule, and I'm saying more than I intended to, because the previous parts of this series and the NDEs explains in more detail these concepts, but the concept of the golden rule being sort of virtually enforced by the fact that when people have gone to the other side and had a life review, what happens is typically they're actually seeing their life from the standpoint of the people they affected, not just themselves. So they see how they impacted other people throughout their life, whether they did good things or bad, and they're not being judged or thrown in hell for this. It's educational. They're seeing it from a standpoint of knowing this. How are you going to, I mean, I would see it's a big life transforming thing, because now going forward, you will want to be better to other people, but not only to be better to other people, but the big revelation is that we're all connected. We're all connected. We're all essentially part of God. We're extensions of God. And he's given us this life and this opportunity to manifest who and what we are, what we're to become. And we have a lot of control over that. We don't realize we have. So one of the problems with cults and religions and control groups, to me, is the fact that if we're given free will, and this is an opportunity to learn when we're here on earth, and we're encountering a lot of people that are also in that process, and we don't realize that we're all connected, and what we do to them affects us. Ultimately, we are going to experience what we do to them, and we're all connected. So we're not that different. So there's plenty of good reason for wanting to be a better person. So the idea of being exposed to this extreme amount of love on the other side, people come back here and they don't want to come back because it's so much better over there. This is the away planet. They're home when they're back with God and their ancestors and relatives and their guides and angels, and everything is beautiful and amazing over there. And this is great, because this is what we were hoping to find. It would be a heaven of some sort on the other side. And this is a more plausible heaven because it involves not ever dying. We never die, and we're never finished completely. We're still learning and ascending in the scheme of things. And there's evidence to support this. So even though it seems entirely trippy and crazy, it's more plausible to me than any other scenario that could have been presented. And these are people that have been there and seen it. So they're convinced. And I have not had an NDE. I don't necessarily need one. I'd rather not. If it's possible, I'd like to learn everything I can without having to go to the other side until it's my time. But it gives me an enormous amount of hope and an enormous amount of peace of mind and relief. I no longer fear death. I don't like right now, I'm dealing with some medical issues that make life less pleasant than I'd like it to be. But on the other hand, I don't want to leave yet. I'd like to stay healthy and spend some time here and really learn all I can to make this a successful experience and be able to share this experience. Along those lines, I also feel like, we're evolving as people. We're getting better. Now, the planet is very messed up right now, and there's a lot of, we have political problems all over the world, wars, famines, floods, fires, climate change issues, all kinds of terrible stuff going on. And yet people come back from the other side and say it's been explained to them that this is a learning planet. Everything is going according to plan, and there are consequences for what we do. And it's okay. This is temporary. When this is all over, we'll go to the other side. The Bible and various people say, well, yeah, one day this planet will recover and things will be normal and good again. And I don't find that impossible to believe. It's been here a long time, and it will be here a lot longer. And there's other planets. There's plenty of other places we can go. So that's all really cool. I'm going to take a quick little water break here, and I'll be right back. I can kind of glance at my notes meanwhile. I'm back. I want to touch on a few other points here before I run out of steam. One of which is I was starting to talk about how control groups, cults, some churches interfere with our growth and development, and they certainly do, because I realize major things such as free will is very, very key. And also, there's premise, Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So to me, submitting to leaders that insist on obedience and unquestioning obedience, that refuse to entertain any questions, I've always been suspicious of people like that, because people that tell you you can't ask questions, you just have to memorize and follow the doctrines that are fed to you, which describes Scientology, a lot of cults, fundamentalist churches in many cases, basically tell you you have to believe A, B, and C, and you have to follow this exactly, and you have to be obedient. You can't question anything. And to me, that's an enormous, I mean, if you accept that, you've just had your free will taken away. You've been essentially enslaved. Some cults actually do enslave people. They have to do what they're told. They can't question anything in the doctrine. And I don't see how you can possibly be set free by knowing the truth if you're being told a bunch of lies and dogma and not allowed to think for yourself. And to me, probably one of the few things that's I can say has definitely helped save me from the cult I was in and from other things that would send you into insanity, essentially, is thinking for yourself, critical thinking. And to save yourself from enslavement and wrong thinking, you have to apply yourself. You can't be lazy. So to me, it's like, the Bible and others, people have said, seek wisdom, 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 and, the Proverbs and things like that. Seeking wisdom. It's work. It's good work. It's like not just accepting things and drifting along through life thinking that you'll get by. I mean, in some sense, yeah, you will get by. But I also have gone through this sort of part of my process of seeking and wanting to know the truth is simply praying to whatever powers that be, even without really knowing exactly who I was praying to. Just saying, well, don't let me pass out of this life without learning the lessons I'm here to learn. Because I always felt like, yeah, learning, we're here, and it's a learning experience, and we may as well make the best of it. So having put that out there, more recently, I came to a point I finally realized, you know what, I just want to know the actual real truth. I've been under, a lot of fairly fundamentalist Christian type beliefs and cult-like beliefs that got drummed into my head. And I'm like, I'm still not there. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, to quote the YouTube U2 song. I actually really love that song. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And I'm like, now I feel like I hopefully won't be able to sing that song forever, because finding out about this NDE research and what other people have experienced is starting to answer a lot of the questions. A God that is accepting and loving of everybody and anyone, and regardless of background, religion, da, 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 da. I mean, this wipes a lot of the, like, how can there be 20 different gods? How can there all this stuff? There's no need for there to be. Basically, the teaching that I'm believing in is that we're all one. So it's not like there needs to be all these gods. It's like we're all connected. We're all part of the creative force, if you will. So I find that to be very hopeful. I'm going to glance at my notes here just so I don't get totally lost here. Here's another thing. So we have free will. So some people come back from NDE experiences with prophetic kind of information, like predicting the future, which I hold a certain amount of skepticism about that, because it's very hard to prove that. It's hard to quantify. But what has been said that makes sense to me is the idea that people will see things, and they're sort of based on, like, if we stay on our present course and heading, this is what's going to happen, type of thing. But it's been emphasized that we have free will, therefore we make decisions, we can change the future, things don't have to play out the way they appear to be headed. And I think of it sort of like the GPS thing, even on a personal level. For me, is like, there's points in your life where you may do a good thing or a bad thing, but it's free will. So we can make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. I gave myself permission a few years ago to just plunge into life and get more engaged, and just, like, I used to be held back by fear of failure, fear of going off track, da, da, da. And I'm like, you know what, we're here to learn. So screw it. Let's just give it our best shot and apply Wayne Gretzky's philosophy. You miss every shot you don't take. Let's go for it. Let's try. Let's be willing to accept the fact that failure is okay, in the sense of you're going to do your best. You're going to try. And I think it was Edison that, took him about, 10,000 tries to come up with a light bulb that worked. So every try that was a failure got him closer to finding something that would work. So it wasn't a waste of his time. It was necessary to go and try again and again and again and again, and keep learning and eventually get it right. And it's like, that's what life's supposed to be for. We're not supposed to live in a little box where we won't allow ourselves the privilege of trying and failing, because failure provides course correcting information. So that sounds better, doesn't it? So this is a learning experience, and we're not supposed to waste that. So I was going to give this analogy about the GPS. Like, you say you're driving and you're following the GPS somewhere, and you get to a point where it's like you take a wrong turn, or you take a wrong exit off a highway, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be a major drag to try to go back and get back on that exit. I got to go 12 miles to the next exit. Well, you know what? It just resets itself. It recenters. So then it's sort of like, okay, you screwed up. So you're up the road 12 miles. Is there a shorter way to get back on track without completely backtracking? It'll send you a different way, and you'll still end up at your destination. And sometimes it really will cost you more than a couple of minutes. So I sort of think of life like that. Okay, so you botched it. You made a bad decision. All right, that's not the end of the game. That's not the end of your life. All right, you're screwed up, but you're going to learn something from that mistake, and you can probably get back on track. So it won't be a total loss. So just, deal with it. Keep moving forward. And I mean, in some cases, some areas of life, you need to go back and undo things and take them apart and restart what you did. And that's necessary. But in the general sense, people have relationships that fail. Yeah. So you accept the fact you screwed up. That's a mistake you made. You learn from it, and you recover and you move on. That's just part of how it works. What else have I got to touch on here? Okay, yeah, I had this sort of thought this morning that I just wanted to throw in here because it sort of goes along with this. So the golden rule, I mean, one of my big takeaways, which is completely reasonable, is that people come back from the other side, and they're so changed. They've experienced this fantastic outpouring of love and non-judgmental love, acceptance, encouragement, and they've had a life review in some cases and been basically forgiven. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't condemning. They just saw the mistakes they made. And now when they do come back, most of them will come back on the basis of the love they now have for their people that they left behind, their kids, family, pets, whatever. And they want to stay there. But on the other hand, they don't want to leave these people back here without them and abandon them. So many of them will come back, even though they know life's going to be rough, much rougher than what they saw on the other side. They'll come back out of sheer love and desire to help the people that are back here. And so one of the conundrums that was dealing with too, with the idea we're back here and this is so screwed up, how are we ever going to convince enough people to get it right or get on track to really have any effect? And yet I believe that we're entering an age of awakening and enlightenment that is going to bring about a revolution, that things are going to get much better. And that's been prophesied by people that come back from the other side. And it's like, yeah, we're going to go through, and this has been prophesied in the Bible and by other people. So I don't find this difficult to believe, is that things will get much worse before they get better. And for the simple reason that things, if they're allowed to go to an extreme, very often that duality or dualism between good and evil is the extremes show what ultimately is the outcome of going in a certain direction. So in other words, if we have really terrible, traumatic, horrible wars, and we see the devastation and the damage and the pain and the suffering and the misery, that may teach us that's not a good way to go. And we don't want to go there. We don't want to live in that. We don't want to go back there. And I feel like we're in a degree of that right now. So many of us want to have peace and have a better life. And also the waste, the opportunity cost of the spending of billions of dollars and the killing and the maiming of people, the creating of all this neediness that we have. I realize I don't know if it's just me, but on my Facebook and on the newspaper, you're always seeing the news, you're always seeing just damage and devastation and earthquakes and floods and famines and fires and murders and wars and shootings and all these things. It's like, why and how could this possibly be? Well, it's people that are doing, in many cases, what they think is right at that time. They're trying to defend or promote their religion. They've been deceived. They've bought into something that requires them to do violence to other people, or they're trying to defend themselves against an enemy that's doing the violence. So in every case, it's wrong against wrong and violence against violence and all this madness. And we're trying to say, well, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? So my sense is, and my hope is that we'll pass through a phase of really terrible violence and situations that are horrible, and more people will become awakened to the fact that it's terrible, not necessary, and there's got to be a better way. And I think I'm hoping for this. Like, in my earthly life so far, I mean, I've kind of experienced pockets of peace and love and joy and people cooperating and getting along. And usually that's microcosms, like the globe, the world as a whole. There's too many different diverse groups, but you can get isolated pockets of people for a generation or a few generations or a given sect or something like this, where the people will agree to basically a code of some sort. Or this can be a small group, like literally a family, a couple, up to like a nation, a corporation, a country, a religious group, where in that particular group for a period of time, there's peace, where people all agree to be at peace, to support each other. And these little microcosmic, like some of the churches I were in were like that. And they were very good. The people all helped each other and kind of supported each other, encouraged each other. And it was a little microcosm that worked. So you have these little bubbles. Well, for the things to work like that at a global level, it would mean a huge amount of agreement and on a bunch of things. And if ultimately it's possible, it's idealistic, but it's possible that we would all become so enlightened that we'd be like, hey, you know what? We're all the same. We're all connected. What I do to you, I'm doing to myself. And if we can all accept this somehow and assimilate it and act on it, then literally we would be applying the golden rule, which seems preposterously simple. And yet Jesus was in some ways a simple guy. Love being the driving motive for everything, do everything, let everything be done in love. Well, if we do everything in love and we apply the golden rule, then I would say there's not going to be very much strife and stress. And the amount of resources, I did some calculations a couple of weeks ago and posted it on Facebook because I found it interesting, is the amount of money that, say, the top 10 richest people in the world have was, some hundreds of billions of dollars, a terrific amount of money. And if it were all spent on just building houses for people instead of blowing everything up and going to war, hundreds of millions of houses could be built. I mean, if we translate the amount of money that's spent on war, which is also, tremendous, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we applied it to doing something constructive and helping people, we could do an enormous amount of good. There'd be, we could wipe out pretty much, not necessarily famine because now we've screwed the weather up, but I mean, there would be plenty to go around. There really would. We could have plenty of housing. If we weren't spending so much time and money destroying things, we could really do a lot of constructive things. So there's a lot of good that could be done. But again, we're doing this in an imperfect world with imperfect people. There's people that are destructive. There's lazy people that are the other side of the same coin. The Bible says that lazy man is the brother of the destroyer. I mean, so people that aren't willing to do their best and put in to help are just as detrimental as somebody that's going around destroying. So there's many levels of ignorance. An enlightened person obeying the golden rule is going to want to put in all they can. They're going to want to help. I mean, it sounds sort of funny, but I mean, gratitude to me is a huge, it's sort of a branch of love. It's sort of an expression of love. Like gratitude for the good in the world keeps you sane and happy, compared to just complaining and bitching and moaning all the time about things, which is easy to do if you're only, aware of what's negative. But I mean, even the doctors and people that are willing to perform surgeries and run hospitals and do all this work, I'm like, well, thank God for those people. I'd be dead several times over if it weren't for people that devoted their life to learning how to get in there and perform surgery. I wouldn't want to do it. I'm not medical. I freak out over that stuff. But I'm glad there's people that can do it. I'm glad there's a guy that can fix the car, the furnace, or, do his job. I spent most of my life as a carpenter, construction guy, do some real estate work. We're all given different gifts. We all need to manifest what we're given, what we can do. So a quick bounce back to something I said earlier. So the cult thing and like fundamentalist type religions and all, oppressive dictatorships, authoritarian organizations. One of the things I wanted to emphasize was simply this: is I feel like job one in this life and in any life for anybody is to become who you really are, who you're supposed to become. Manifest yourself, use your skills, learn all you can, give whatever gifts that you have to help society in general and help other people. And the destructive things about authoritarian religions, Jesus wasn't an authoritarian, never wanted to be, told us we were all brothers, don't call anyone master or teacher. And yet the church totally threw that out the window and created all these authoritarian structures. Cult leaders popped up. What are they doing to you? Taking away your freedom, enslaving you, telling you not to think for yourself. They'll tell you how to think, what to think, where to think, what to do, how to do it. I'm like, how do you become who you're supposed to be if you're being micromanaged and oppressed? I don't see how that can happen. Or you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. I believe that our job is to learn, and that means learning. Okay, if you have in a trade or whatever, get really good at it, master it, do great at it, become a good doctor, a good carpenter, a good lawyer, whatever your job is, master it. Become the best you can at whatever you're doing, and that's requires work on your part, seeking out truth, seeking out expertise, thinking, applying yourself. So to make life work, you get out of something what you put into it. So applying yourself and learning is so important. And a lot of people are interested in spiritual things, and there's a lot out there. Some of it's right, some of it isn't right. But I feel like, even the Bible says, if you seek the truth, you'll find it. So my attitude is, okay, I'm going to rely on that. And because a lot of the Bible is basically the wisdom of people that was recorded over a long period of time and assembled. It's not all 100% correct in the sense that I don't think it was all recorded just by people that wanted the actual truth. I think there's been a lot of people over time that have distorted and filtered and changed things up so that they could stay in control and use a fear narrative. If they keep people in fear of being judged or going to hell or one thing or another, they maintain control over them. And this is consistent with what a lot of the NDE people have said, that the God that they've experienced is not a controlling, judgmental, top-down authoritarian God. This is a God that is basically creating us in his image with free will, with the capacity to learn and become way more than we ever thought we could, and to do the same miracles and things he did, and then some and more. So, and the way to allow yourself to get on that path is to set yourself free of cult influences, authoritarian influences, people that want to tell you what to think. I feel like, I named my channel Free as an Eagle because that's aspirational. I love eagles. I love birds. I love flying. I love hiking and being on mountains, and I love nature. And these are all healthy, therapeutic things. Exercise and nature, these are uplifting things. NDEs have basically said, yeah, nature is a healing thing. It's part of, we're connected. On the other side, there's beautiful colors and sounds and music, and nature exists there in a more beautiful form. Everything on the other side is light and energy. So it's beautiful. And I'm like, cool. So Earth is sort of a shadow of things on the other side. What we have here is very imperfect, but there's still a terrific amount of beauty here and a lot of things to enjoy and experience. So, get yourself free. If you're involved in a cult or you're being told what to do or how to think, and you're capable of being on your own, and, you even have guides on the other side. I'm glad there's spirit guides, there's angels. We're being protected, we're being guided. I find this fantastically hopeful and inspiring. So I hope some of this makes sense. I know it's a little trippy, and it's based on my watching hundreds and hundreds of YouTube NDE videos, reading books on life after death and the like. And I would encourage you to look into this yourself, but with a critical, skeptical eye. And I like the word skepticism because it implies a healthy skepticism, questioning things, question. If anybody won't let you question something, run from them. if they can't stand up to a little questioning and they don't want to help you learn, stay away from them, get away from them. If somebody wants to micromanage you, I mean, if you're in a job where you need to learn how to do the job, yeah, listen and submit to that. But in terms of your own philosophy and belief system, do your own exploring, develop your own philosophy, and it'll work for you. You need to develop that, because it's by gaining that wisdom that you become free. So I think at this point I've gone on a long time, and if anything I didn't get to in this little rant, I'll save it for another rant. But I hope you enjoy this and get a little bit out of it. And again, if you have any questions or comments, make comments in the YouTube comment section. You can email me. I have an email. It's free as an eagle VT, which represents Vermont. Free as an eagle VT at gmail.com. And I had to put the VT in there because there was some point in the past there was a racehorse named Free as an Eagle, so I couldn't get Free as an Eagle at Gmail. I had to add the Vermont to it. But anyway, that's a way to reach me or leave me comments here. I'm excited if you happen to be anybody that's had an NDE or wants to discuss it with me or really open to it, let me know. I want to start doing some live streams to discuss these concepts. I know, I'm getting a few subscribers here and people that enjoy listening to this material. So I'm very excited. I want to talk more about it with people. So sometime soon I'm going to do a live stream. And if you're interested in jumping in on that or just listening to it, watching it, that'd be great. Anyway, I'm excited about this, and I will hopefully talk to you again soon. I'm going to stop the recording, and we will hopefully see you